that there must have been an increase in productivity. So instead of going from the facts to the story, we're going to go, or to a model, we're going to go from the model to what we think is a factual conclusion. All right, so here we go. What do we know about productivity? We know, we're going to conclude this, we know about productivity, about tobacco, that there was a decrease in the price of tobacco and an increase in the quantity sold. So we know there was a decrease in P and an increase in Q. We also know that there was no change in wages and there was no change in the prices of land. So let me draw a picture. Supply and demand. Price on the vertical axis, quantity on the horizontal axis. Downward sloping demand D1, upward sloping supply S1. Find your equilibrium, dash it over. Initial price P1, dash it down. Initial quantity Q1. So the facts that we have are that the price went down and the quantity went up. So find some dot and draw a dot that's a lower price and a higher quantity. It's going to be someplace in that quadrant to the lower right of the original dot. It might be on your original demand curve, it might not be. In order for the equilibrium price to go down and the equilibrium quantity to go up, what has to happen to the supply curve? Can it stay the same? Can I get to that dot without shifting my supply curve? No. There's no way to get to that dot without shifting my supply curve. So I've got to have an increase in supply. So there must have been an increase in supply. The way that I drew it, I also have an increase in demand. The way that you drew it, you may have no change in demand, or you may have a decrease in demand. It really doesn't matter. But what everybody in the room has is there has to have been an increase in supply. Regardless of where you drew your dot, if you have a lower price and a higher quantity, there has to have been an increase in supply. Increases in supply. What are the things that can shift our supply curve? Supply curve shift. If there's changes in costs of wages, cost of wages. We know that there was no change in wages. So one of the facts that we have is there was no change in wages. What's another thing that can shift the supply curve? Hold on that one. Increase in the quality of tools, so a change in the tools. They know that there was no change in the technology or the knowledge of how to grow tobacco in that period. No, wait, I take that back. I know, I just said the wrong thing. I know I said the wrong thing. Say your thing again. I'm going to undo that. Go ahead, what was yours? Hold on to that answer. There we go, that's better. Hold that answer. Technology. Whew, almost messed myself up. All right, so wages matter. Wages is one input, more generally the cost of inputs. So we know also that there was no change in the price of land, the other major input to production. So cost of inputs, and the other thing that shifts supply curves are productivity, or how the quality of the inputs. So if we know that there were no changes in the cost of production, in the cost of our inputs, in the cost of labor, in the cost of land, but there has to have been a shift in the supply curve in order to have a lower price and a higher quantity, then the only thing left, back to both of your answers, now I'm going to do it right, the only thing left is that it must have been some sort of increase in the productivity of those inputs. We don't know what sort of increase in productivity. So we know that there must have been an increase in the productivity of inputs. We don't have any evidence that tells us whether it was an increase in the quality of tools or whether it was an increase in the knowledge about rotating the crops. Tobacco is very hard on the land, and you really have to rotate your tobacco crops if you're going to not destroy your land. It does to land what it does to lungs. Destroys them and kills them. So what do? We conclude from this that it must have been an increase in productivity. So this is an example where we're going to take the economic tools and reason from the economic tools to what must have happened historically, even in the absence of historical evidence. We don't have direct historical evidence about the increase in productivity. We do have historical evidence about all the other pieces, and so we use that to reason backwards to the increase in productivity. Sorry for the misstep in all of that. That means we just constructed an argument. Now, you know that in economics, when we say argument, we don't mean, right? Arguments does not mean arguing with somebody in a nasty kind of, I'm really mad at you, why did you tell me I had to do that kind of tone? Argument is just the word that we use to describe how we interact with each other, right? These are all arguments. They're stories. So critiquing arguments, I could also call it critiquing stories, critiquing models. Now, that's a question? Yeah, okay. There was no change in labor supply either. Yeah, so there's no change in the prices of the inputs, and the change in labor supply would have changed the price of labor. Yeah. So we just told a story. We constructed an argument about what must explain the fall in price and the rise in quantity of tobacco. That's an argument. What economists do, and what economics is all about, is learning how to critique those kinds of arguments, how to critique those stories, those models. If you can master this method I'm about to show you for how to critique arguments, you will get A's in all of your economics classes. This is what it means to be an economist. This is how we think. And if you can do this, you're home free. Confronted with an argument about anything, like, for instance, there must have been an increase in productivity in agriculture because, after all, look at these are how I assemble the facts. What do? The first thing that we do, assuming that we want to critique, which is to say disagree with that argument, first thing we're going to do is replicate the argument. We have to be sure we understand what the other person was saying. You're saying productivity must have increased because we know the following. We know that there was a decrease in price and an increase in quantity, no change in the cost of production. Therefore, the only possible explanation left is an increase in productivity. Is that right? So we replicate the argument to make sure that we've got it right. The second thing we do is we identify any assumptions that are involved in that argument. What are the various assumptions? Most of these are about economic behavior. What are the various assumptions that are in that argument that allow me to go from an observation about price and quantity to a conclusion about productivity? Some of those assumptions are explicit. They will have been written down or stated aloud. Some of those assumptions are implicit. They're neither written down nor stated aloud, but they nonetheless matter. So step 2 is to figure out the assumptions. What are the assumptions in that model? The third step is to change one of the assumptions. Change one of the assumptions. For instance, what sort of a market did I assume when I did that tobacco story? What kind of market was that? Was that perfectly competitive, monopolistically competitive? What did I have? Perfectly competitive, right? I made an implicit assumption. I didn't tell you. I didn't say, let's assume it's a perfectly competitive market, so we'll draw a supply and a demand curve. I didn't say that. I just said, let's draw a supply and demand curve. I implicitly assumed that it's a perfectly competitive market. Change one assumption. Don't change all 17 of them. If you identified 17 different assumptions, change one. Think calculus, right? When you do calculus, you're looking for the derivative of some complicated function with regard to one variable. Change one assumption, one variable. Change one assumption, and keyword there. Change one assumption. Once you change that assumption, using the same logical steps, the same type of reasoning, argue through to the conclusion. Oh, but if instead we assume a monopolistic market, are we going to come to the same conclusion? Suppose instead I assume this was a monopoly. well, if I assume it was a monopoly and then I draw my pictures and I say these are the facts I've got, oh, oops, I'm going to come to the same conclusion. That means that if I come to the same conclusion, I've identified an assumption in the story, the argument, but it's an assumption that's not a critical assumption. It's not an important assumption. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether I assume perfect competition or monopolistic competition or monopoly. I'm still going to come to the conclusion that it must have been an increase in productivity. In that case, I need to go back and find a different assumption to change, and change that different assumption, and once again argue through to my conclusion. Aha, here's another implicit assumption. What did we assume about equilibrium? We assumed that market was initially in equilibrium and ultimately in equilibrium, right? We assumed we were going from one equilibrium point to a second equilibrium point. What if, changing the assumption, what if instead, that's how you change the assumption, what if instead we assumed the market had not been in equilibrium to begin with? What if we assumed that that market was out of equilibrium to begin with? Well, then we certainly could get a lower price and a higher quantity without any change in productivity, because we could get there simply by moving to an equilibrium point. Now we've identified a critical assumption. Now we've identified an assumption that really matters, where the conclusion is changed. We have a different conclusion about whether productivity rose. And in that case, we need to go to the last step, and the last step in the story is to look at your alternative assumption. My alternative was, what if instead we started not in equilibrium, but in a disequilibrium? And I need to come up with some evidence. I need to either come up with some empirical evidence, or some narrative evidence, or construct a really good rhetorical argument that supports my alternative assumption that we started from a point of disequilibrium. That we shouldn't argue that we're going from equilibrium point to equilibrium point. That's the fifth step. If you can do all 5 of those steps, you get it. Home free. You're an economist. We'll give you the stamp. Stamp your hand. You're out of here. Do this. Go into class. Somebody puts a model up on the board. Raise your hand. Say, but isn't that assuming da-da-da-da? That's a really good question, right? That's a really good. I hate it when people do that. That's a really good question. What was mine? Chopped liver? You know. So, but they'll say that. They'll say that's a really good question because you just got to the essence of what economics is all about. It's about looking for those assumptions and seeing how do the conclusions that we draw, the stories that we tell, the arguments we construct, how do those things depend upon the assumptions we invoke. This method is what you need for the response papers. This method is what you need for the term paper. This method is what you need on the midterms. This method is what you need in order to be an economist. So, all right. I have no smooth transition from that topic to the next. So, oh, here I got one. I just made one up. Okay. So we've done a bunch of methodology and framework. We said the framework for the course is growth and development. We did a lot of stuff on the growth model. I gave you methodology, which is critiquing arguments. Now let's get started with the story of history. So let's start. All right, we're going to start about 14,000 years ago, 14,000 years ago, with migration across the Bering Strait. So the archaeological evidence indicates that humans first came to North America through these migrations across the Bering Strait, following the large animals known as megafauna. Notice we're going to do 14,000 years of history in about 12 minutes. Okay, and they were moving into North America. Notice the 2 routes down into North America. Here's the Rocky Mountains, the place where you always get turbulence when you fly east. The Rocky Mountains. There. Okay. What else do we know from archaeological evidence? We know that these individuals were hunters. We know that they used capital. That they used machines, capital. These things are Clovis points that have been found in fossils, so they use those as hunters to kill the animals. That's a form of capital. Right? Workers, laborers were not just going out saying to the animals, please die, we're hungry. They had forms of capital, these Clovis points, and the Folsom points that they used as well. Both of these things. All right, so let's move forward 11,000 years. See, I told you it was going to go fast. And let me read to you a little bit as you look at these pictures. As the sun rose over the rich floodplain, people walked to work down the narrow streets of their riverbank city. Some hurried to shops where they manufactured tools, crafted pottery, worked metal, fashioned ornamental jewelry, goods destined to be exchanged in the far corners of the continent. Others left their densely populated neighborhoods for the outlying countryside, where in the summer heat they worked the seemingly endless fields that fed the city. From almost any point, people could see the great temple, there it is, that rose in the center of the city, the temple where the priests in their splendid costumes acted out public rituals of death and renewal. Where is it? Oh, cheater. You're absolutely right. Missouri. This is Cahokia Mounds. Cahokia Mounds is just across the Mississippi River from St. Louis. And it is the center of activity in North America. This is circa 13th century, so circa 1200 something. So 13th century now, how many years ago is that? 800 years ago. So in the 13th century, the 1200s, Cahokia Mounds, where I went last summer, woohoo, but I didn't have a camera, so I had to download pictures rather than show you my photo log. By the way, Econ 113 is part travel log. So I've been to 49 out of the 50 states. I don't know that I'll be able to tell you about all 49 I've been to, but I'll tell you about a lot. And understanding economic history, like I said, is geography, and there's no better way to understand the geography and the economic history of this country than to get in a car and drive it. We don't count a state unless we get there and get out of the car. So just dipping through a corner of a state doesn't count. You have to actually get into the state in order to count it. Cahokia Mounds, which I was just reading to you about, is now it's a state park, I believe, state or national park, just across the river from St. Louis. And it was, as they described, the center of activity in the 13th century. Get out your maps. The different regions of the United States in the pre-colonial times had different economic activity. And those economic activities depend upon the natural endowments of those areas. So here, where am I here? So Cahokia is right about there, where this red dot is. It's just where the rivers come together. All right, but we're going to talk about the different activities in these different regions of the country. So I think the way that this map is set up, they're going to show. For those of you who printed out the slides, the next slide that shows all of the names and so on is not going to come up. It's going to go thing by thing. So let me see if this works. There we go. Good. All right. The Arctic region. The Arctic region was the primary activity in the Arctic region. We're talking pre-colonial times, fishing and sea mammal hunting up there in the Arctic region. Why? It's cold. At that time, there's a lot of snow and ice up there, and there's not a whole lot of activity. You're not going to grow corn on ice. The subarctic. The subarctic is subsistence hunting. So this is what's now part of Canada. Subsistence hunting in the subarctic. So there's not a lot of people who are going to live there. In the Northwest. So the Northwest includes the Seattle area, Portland area, the Northwest Cascades, and so on. Salmon fishing, still today. Oh my God, awesome salmon. Small game hunting, hunting and gathering, lots of salmon. Fabulous salmon. Really good salmon. Still. In the Great Basin, which goes basically from Tahoe to the Rockies, hunting and gathering. Today it's the desert. It's the part where the speed limit is like 85 miles an hour as you go across. It's down. Hunting and gathering in the Great Basin. In the Southwest, irrigated farming, pottery, and weaving. So if you've been to New Mexico and Arizona, you know it's pretty hot and dry down there. If you're going to farm down there, you need irrigated farming. Irrigation is not a 20th century invention. Irrigated farming was the activity that's taking place. This is all before the Europeans come to America. So all this is pre-colonial, before Europeans arrive on the Americas. Irrigated farming, pottery, and weaving. All this evidence is thanks to our friends, the archaeologists. In the Great Plains, farming and then ultimately bison hunting. So initially farming and then lots of hunting in the Great Plains. In the South, and we're going to come back to this on Monday when we read David Wishart's article. In the South, settled agriculture, farms. People had farms where they farmed. This is, if your image of Native Americans is teepees, teepees is up here. Settled agriculture, houses, places where people lived, permanent settlements here. Lots of those kinds of mounds. Not as big as Cahokia, but lots of mounds in this area. And trade in crafts. In the Northeast, hunting and gathering and limited agriculture. Why limited agriculture in the Northeast instead of in the South? It's a lot colder. I mean, right now, we lived last year outside Albany over here, and my son complained because one morning when he had to wait for the school bus at 6:46 in the morning, aren't you glad you're not high school anymore? When he had to wait for the school bus at 6:46 in the morning, it was 9 degrees. This morning, -2. Can you imagine standing outside waiting for a school bus in -2? Limited agriculture. Too cold. Too much snow and ice. Less snow and ice. Okay, and is that it? That must be it. That was it. All right, what else do we know from our friends the archaeologists? We know that there was a lot of trading that took place. And in fact, we know that these are the various trade networks. So here in the center, back, change it to a pen. Here in the center is Cahokia, the city that I read to you about, right outside of St. Louis. But those lines, if you took an interstate highway map today and plopped it down on top of this, you're going to get a pretty good correlation between the trade routes, and these are trade routes circa 1300. They figured this out from archaeological evidence, right? You have things that are only found in the upper Northwest that the archaeologists are finding in Missouri and Indiana and Illinois. So these are the trade routes. There was trade that took place in those days and age amongst the various Native American tribes. Why? Because there are gains from trade. One way of understanding the pattern of trade is through the concept of the gains from trade. So yesterday when we had the production possibilities frontier, we said we could have two different goods. I'll call them good C and good I, which I think is the same thing I used yesterday. And we said that the production possibilities frontier is a downward sloping nonlinear curve, shows us a set of combinations of output that can be produced with the available resources. And one way to get to combinations that are not within the production possibilities frontier is through growth. We've spent now a day talking about that. The other way to consume some combination of output that is beyond the production possibilities frontier is through trade. That if economies specialize in the good in which they have a comparative advantage and then trade, everyone's better off. There's more output in total. That specialization in trade, those gains from trade exist if the opportunity costs differ. It's not the only condition, but it's one. What leads to differences in opportunity costs? Tell me about farming in the Arctic versus farming in the Southeast. Those differences in the natural endowments create natural differences in the opportunity cost. There are different opportunity costs to farming in the South, lower opportunity costs to farming in the South, than there are to farming in other parts of what is now North America because of the natural endowments, because the land differs, because the geography differs. And because of those differences in opportunity costs, then there were possibilities of these gains from trade. You all have a great weekend. I'll see you on Tuesday.